What if the quiet you feel this Christmas is not emptiness, but an invitation? The lights are on. The songs are playing. The world looks joyful, yet here you are, sitting with a silence that feels heavier than the season. You smile when you must. You answer messages when you can, but inside there is a question you don't say out loud. Why do I feel so alone when everyone else seems so full? Christmas has a way of doing that. It magnifies joy for some and magnifies loneliness for others. Empty chairs feel louder. Old memories return without asking, and nights feel longer when the heart is tired. You may be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. Or you may truly be alone, wondering if anyone remembers you tonight. This is where the story begins, not with angels or crowds, not with celebration, but with a single human heart, waiting in the dark, hoping for a sign. Jonathan Roumie once spoke about moments like this, moments when faith feels quiet, when God feels distant, when hope feels thin. As an actor known for playing Jesus, many assume his life is full of constant light, but his message is simple, and it is not about fame or strength. It is about presence. He reminds us that the first Christmas did not begin in noise. It began in obscurity. In a small town, in a place with no room, in a moment that looked forgotten by the world. If you feel forgotten tonight, you are closer to that story than you think. Because before there were carols, there was waiting. Before there was joy, there was uncertainty. Mary did not know how everything would turn out. Joseph did not have all the answers, and yet God was already there, working quietly. You may feel like no one sees your struggle this Christmas. You may feel like your prayers are hitting the ceiling and falling back down. But what if this silence is not rejection? What if it is holy ground? Jonathan's message is not loud. It does not rush you. It simply asks you to breathe, to remember that God often comes softly, not in fireworks, but in whispers, not in crowds, but in personal moments. This season tells a story of God stepping into human loneliness, not avoiding it, not fixing it from afar, but entering it fully. So if your heart feels heavy, stay here a little longer. This story is for you. And what comes next may change how you see this night entirely. Because what if you are not as alone as you feel? And what if this Christmas is only the beginning? Have you ever wondered why God chose to come quietly instead of powerfully? That question sits at the center of Christmas, especially for those who feel alone. If God wanted attention, he could have come with armies. If he wanted applause, he could have arrived in palaces. But he didn't. He chose a manger. He chose vulnerability. Jonathan Roumie often reflects on this truth. He speaks about how Jesus understands loneliness because he lived it. From the very beginning, Jesus entered a world that did not fully welcome him. There was no room at the inn. That detail matters more than we realize. Think about it. The Savior of the world began life knowing what it felt like to be turned away. If you have felt rejected this year, ignored or pushed aside, you are not strange to God. You are familiar to him. Loneliness is not a failure of faith. It is part of the human story. Even Jesus experienced moments of deep isolation. Moments when friends fell asleep instead of praying. Moments when crowds disappeared. Moments when silence surrounded him. Jonathan's message is gentle but honest. Faith does not erase loneliness. Faith gives it meaning. You may be asking God tonight, where are you? But what if he is closer than you think, sitting with you in the quiet, understanding every ache you feel? Christmas is not about pretending everything is okay. It is about God meeting us exactly where we are. Broken, tired, unsure, waiting, this season can reopen wounds. It can remind us of who is missing. It can bring grief we thought we had buried. And yet, this is the season God chose to enter humanity. Jonathan once said that playing Jesus changed how he sees suffering. It taught him that God does not rush past pain. He stays. If you are alone tonight, God is not disappointed in you. He is not distant. He is not annoyed by your tears. Scripture tells us he is close to the brokenhearted. Close does not always mean loud. Sometimes close means still. Sometimes it means simply staying. So maybe the question is not, Why am I alone? Maybe the question is, who is with me in this? Because the Christmas story whispers a truth many miss. God did not wait for us to feel joyful before coming. He came because we couldn't find joy on our own. And if that is true, then your loneliness does not disqualify you from hope. It invites hope in, but what does that hope look like when the night feels long, and when tomorrow feels uncertain? What if hope does not arrive as happiness, but as endurance? That is a hard truth, especially at Christmas. We expect warmth, we expect smiles, we expect miracles wrapped in bright paper, but often hope comes quietly, teaching us how to stay when we want to run. Jonathan Roumie speaks to this kind of hope, not the kind that ignores pain, but the kind that walks through it. He reminds us that Jesus never promised an easy life. He promised presence, and presence changes everything. Think about the shepherds, ordinary people, night workers, forgotten by society. They were not looking for God. They were simply doing their job, trying to survive another night. And that is where the angels appeared. Not in a palace, not in a temple, but in a field. If you feel ordinary, tired, or unnoticed, you are exactly the kind of person God has always met. Loneliness can make us believe lies. It tells us we don't matter, that our story is small, that our prayers are weak. But Christmas says the opposite. It says God moves toward the overlooked. Jonathan's message is not about pretending you're okay. It's about letting God meet you in the truth of where you are, even if that truth is messy, even if it includes doubt. Faith is not confidence. Faith is trust. Trust that God is working even when you can't see it. You may be carrying questions that have no answers yet. You may feel like everyone else has moved on while you are stuck. But the story of Jesus shows us that waiting is not wasted. The world waited hundreds of years for the Messiah. Generation after generation prayed and died without seeing the promise fulfilled. Yet God was faithful. Your waiting matters. This Christmas may not look the way you hoped. It may not heal everything, but it can become a turning point, a moment when you choose to believe that God is still writing your story. Jonathan often says that Jesus sees the person behind the pain. He sees the heart, not the performance. And that means you don't have to prove anything tonight. You can rest, you can breathe, you can be honest. Because hope is not loud, it is steady, and it is closer than you think. But what happens when the night gets even quieter and the doubts get louder? Have you noticed how silence can feel like abandonment, when prayers go unanswered, when days blur together? When Christmas morning feels empty instead of exciting, silence can make us wonder if God has stepped away. But Jonathan Roumie offers a different perspective. Silence, he says, is often where God does his deepest work. Jesus spent 30 years in silence before his ministry began. 30 years of ordinary life, no miracles. No crowds, just faithfulness in the unseen. That truth matters if you feel unseen right now. Your life may not feel dramatic. It may not feel important, but God is not impressed by noise. He is drawn to faithfulness. Loneliness can strip us down. It removes distractions. It forces us to confront what we really believe. And while that can be painful, it can also be sacred. Jonathan reminds us that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray, not because he was weak, but because solitude creates space for connection. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. God may be inviting you into a deeper relationship, one that does not depend on feelings or circumstances, one built on trust. Christmas night was quiet. The world did not stop. Most people slept through the greatest moment in history, yet God was moving. If you feel like life is passing you by, remember this: God's timing is not rushed, and His work is not always visible. Your tears matter, your questions matter, your presence matters. This season is not asking you to be strong. It is asking you to be open. Jonathan's message is clear. Jesus is not far from those who feel alone. He is closest to them, so maybe tonight, instead of fighting the silence, you sit with it. Maybe you whisper a simple prayer. Not polished, not perfect, just honest. God hears that. And even if nothing changes immediately, something is shifting. Because silence is not the end of the story. But what comes after the silence, and are you ready to receive it? What if God is already answering you, just not the way you expected? That thought can feel unsettling. We want clear signs, clear direction, clear comfort, but God often works through subtle moments. Jonathan Roumie speaks about surrender, about releasing the need to control outcomes, about trusting God even when the path feels unclear. Christmas teaches us that God's greatest gift came wrapped in vulnerability. A baby, dependent, fragile. If God chose that path, maybe strength looks different than we think. Loneliness can teach us compassion. It softens us. It connects us to others who hurt. And Jesus came to create connection. You may feel disconnected from people this season. But you are not disconnected from God. He sees you when you wake up. He hears you when you sigh. He knows the weight you carry. Jonathan's portrayal of Jesus often highlights his humanity, his kindness, his patience. That is not accidental. It reflects who God truly is. God is not waiting for you to fix yourself. He is not disappointed by your sadness. He is present in it. This Christmas, the invitation is simple. Let God love you where you are, not where you think you should be. You don't need the right words. You don't need the right mood. You just need honesty. Hope may come slowly. Healing may take time, but you are not forgotten, and the story is still unfolding. Because if God can bring light into a stable, what light might He bring into your life next? Have you considered that your loneliness might become someone else's hope? Pain has a strange way of preparing us for purpose. Not by breaking us, but by shaping us. Jonathan Roumie often talks about empathy, about how suffering opens our eyes to others. Jesus did not avoid pain. He transformed it. Your story matters, even the painful parts. This Christmas may feel incomplete. But God is not finished. The manger led to the cross, and the cross led to resurrection. That journey began in quiet obedience. If you are walking through a difficult season, you are walking a path Jesus understands deeply. He does not rush you. He walks with you. Loneliness does not mean you are off course. It may mean you are being prepared. Prepared to love deeper, to listen better, to comfort others someday. Jonathan's message is not about quick fixes. It is about faith that lasts. You may not see the purpose now, but one day you may look back and see how God carried you through. And you will know you were never alone. But before that day comes, there is one more truth you need to hear. What if this Christmas is not about what you lack, but about who you have? That is the heart of the message. Jesus came to be called Emmanuel, God with us, not God above us, not God distant from us, with us. Jonathan Roumie reminds us that this is not a metaphor. It is a promise. If you feel alone tonight, God is with you. In the quiet, in the questions, in the waiting. You are seen, you are known, you are loved. This season will pass. Feelings will change. Circumstances will shift. But God remains. So as this Christmas night unfolds, take a breath. Let the silence remind you that God often works there. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not alone. And perhaps the greatest gift this Christmas is realizing that you never truly were. What if the miracle you've been waiting for is already happening inside you, not around you, not through changed circumstances, but quietly within your heart where no one else can see? Christmas is almost over now. The songs begin to fade. The lights slowly come down, and for many people, this is the hardest part. When the world moves on, but your feelings remain. When the joy feels temporary and the loneliness feels familiar again. But this is where Jonathan Roumie's message becomes even more important. He reminds us that Jesus did not come just for one night, one season, or one feeling. He came to stay. Long after the manger, long after the shepherds, long after the celebration ended, God with us was never meant to be seasonal. If you woke up this morning still feeling alone, that does not mean Christmas failed. It may mean Christmas has planted something that needs time to grow. Faith rarely explodes into our lives. More often it settles in quietly, like a seed, like a whisper, like a steady presence that says, I'm here even now. Jonathan often speaks about perseverance, about continuing to trust when emotions fluctuate. Because real faith is not built on moments, it is built on commitment. You may not feel strong today. You may not feel hopeful, but strength is not required for God to work. Willingness is. Jesus did not ask people to understand everything. He asked them to follow one step at a time, one day at a time. Loneliness has a way of narrowing our vision. It makes the future feel empty, but God sees far beyond what you can imagine. The same God who orchestrated the first Christmas is still working in your life. Even if it feels slow, even if it feels silent, Jonathan's message is gentle but firm. Don't give up in the in-between. Don't walk away just because you don't feel immediate relief. Some of the most powerful transformations happen quietly, without announcement. You may be healing more than you realize. You may be growing stronger roots than you can see. You may be learning to trust God in ways that will carry you for the rest of your life. This season of loneliness does not define you. It does not diminish your worth. It does not mean you are behind. It may mean you are being shaped. Jesus spent time alone. He was misunderstood. He was rejected, and yet he never doubted his purpose. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. You only need to stay. Stay open, stay honest, stay willing. Jonathan often says that God meets us in our humanity, not our perfection. And that means right now, exactly as you are enough. As you move forward from this Christmas, carry this truth with you. You are not walking alone into the new days ahead. God goes with you, into ordinary mornings, into quiet evenings, into unanswered questions, and one day, maybe sooner than you think, you will look back on this season and realize something beautiful. The loneliness that once felt like a burden became the place where your faith deepened, where your heart softened, where God became more real than ever before. So if you're still feeling alone tonight, let this be your reminder. This is not the end of your story. This is not the end of God's work. This is not the end of hope. Sometimes the greatest miracle of Christmas is not that God came to earth, but that He chose to stay with you.